The old wheels of Marcus Thompson's wheelchair made a soft rolling sound on the rough pavement as he moved slowly across the parking lot. The morning sun felt warm on his dark skin, and he smiled slightly as he breathed in the fresh air. It was Tuesday, his day off from work, and he was looking forward to his favorite breakfast at Frank's Diner. Marcus was 52 years old, with graying hair at his temples and kind brown eyes that had seen both joy and pain. He wore a simple blue button-down shirt and dark jeans, clothes that were clean but not expensive. His wheelchair was old but well-maintained, with small American flag stickers on the back that most people never noticed. The diner sat alone on Highway 9, about 20 miles outside the city. It was the kind of place that time seemed to forget. The paint on the walls was faded, the parking lot had cracks filled with weeds, and the neon sign flickered sometimes. But Marcus loved it here. The food was good, the coffee was strong, and the people who ran it treated everyone like family. As Marcus got closer to the front door, he could see Frank through the big window. Frank was 73 years old, with white hair and a belly that showed he enjoyed his own cooking. He was wiping down tables and getting ready for the morning rush. His wife Betty was behind the counter, counting money in the cash register. She was a small woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, and she always remembered how Marcus liked his coffee. Marcus had been coming to this diner for almost 3 years now. At first, Frank and Betty had been a little unsure about the wheelchair. The diner was old, and it wasn't built for people with disabilities, but Marcus never complained. He found ways to make it work, and soon Frank built a wooden ramp over the front steps. It wasn't fancy, but it worked perfectly. The bell above the door always rang when someone came in, and Betty would look up with a smile. She had learned to recognize the sound of Marcus's wheelchair on the wooden ramp. "There's my Tuesday regular," she would say, and Marcus would smile back. They had become friends without ever talking about serious things. They talked about the weather, about the food, about the small happenings in their quiet town. Marcus worked as a counselor at the Veterans Administration office in the city. He helped other veterans who were struggling with injuries, both physical and mental. It was hard work, listening to stories of pain and loss every day. But Marcus was good at it because he understood. He had his own story of pain, his own journey. From despair to acceptance. 15 years ago, Marcus had been a soldier. He was strong then, with powerful legs that could carry him for miles. He served his country in Afghanistan, in a place where the sun was hot and the danger was real. He was proud to wear the uniform, proud to serve alongside men who became his brothers. The explosion happened on a Thursday morning. Marcus remembered that detail clearly, though many other things about that day were fuzzy in his memory. An IED, an improvised explosive device, hidden by the side of a road they had traveled many times before. The blast took his legs and nearly took his life. He spent months in hospitals, first in Germany, then back in the United States. Those were dark days. Marcus had wanted to give up many times. He couldn't understand why he had survived when 2 of his friends in the same vehicle had died. He felt angry at God, angry at the world, angry at himself. The doctors and nurses were kind, but they couldn't fix the hole in his heart that seemed as big as the hole where his legs used to be. Recovery was slow and painful. Learning to use a wheelchair was like learning to walk all over again. Simple things like getting dressed, taking a shower, or cooking a meal became huge challenges. Marcus fell into depression and pushed away his family and friends. He thought his life was over at 37 years old, but slowly, with help from other veterans who had been through similar experiences, Marcus began to heal. Not his body, that would never be the same, but his spirit started to mend. He learned that he could still have a meaningful life, still help people, still find reasons to smile. Going back to school was hard, but Marcus earned a degree in counseling. He wanted to help other veterans who were walking the same difficult path he had walked. When he got the job at the VA office, It felt like his life had purpose again. Now, as he approached the diner on this peaceful Tuesday morning, Marcus felt grateful for the simple pleasures in his life. The warmth of the sun, the smell of bacon cooking, the friendship of Frank and Betty, the satisfaction of work that mattered. These things were enough. He had learned to find peace in routines. Every Tuesday, he would come here around 9 o'clock. He would order the same thing: 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, hash browns, and coffee with 1 sugar. He would sit at the table by the window and watch the world go by. Sometimes truckers would stop for fuel and food. Sometimes families on vacation would pull in, their children excited about the adventure of eating at a real diner. Marcus enjoyed watching people. In his work, he had learned to read faces, to see past what people showed on the surface. He could often tell when someone was sad, even if they were smiling. He could see when people were angry, even if they were trying to hide it. This skill helped him in his job, but it also made him more aware of the good and bad in the world around him. The parking lot was almost empty this morning. Just his modified van, the one with hand controls that let him drive without using his legs, and an old pickup truck that belonged to Frank. Marcus liked the quiet mornings best. Later, when the lunch crowd arrived, the diner would be busy and loud. But in the morning, it was peaceful. As Marcus reached for the door handle, he heard something that made him pause. In the distance, growing louder, was the sound of motorcycle engines. Not just 1 or 2, but many. The sound was getting closer, and Marcus could tell these weren't just motorcycles passing by on the highway. They were slowing down, turning into the parking lot. Marcus had nothing against motorcycle riders. Many of them were veterans too, people who found freedom and peace on the open road. But something about this group made him uneasy. Maybe it was the aggressive sound of their engines, or maybe it was an instinct he had developed during his years as a soldier. Either way, he decided to wait and see what kind of people these were before going inside. The first motorcycle came around the corner, followed by another, then another. Soon, 12 motorcycles had pulled into the small parking lot, their engines loud and powerful. The riders were all men, all wearing leather jackets and dark sunglasses. Their motorcycles were expensive and well-maintained, not the kind of bikes that working people usually owned. Marcus watched carefully as they parked their bikes, taking up more space than they needed. He could see them talking and laughing, but he couldn't hear what they were saying over the noise of their engines. Finally, they turned off the motorcycles, and the sudden silence felt strange after all the noise. The leader of the group was a big man, taller than the others, and broader in the shoulders. He had a thick black beard and arms covered in tattoos. When he took off his helmet, Marcus could see that his eyes were cold and calculating. This was a man who was used to getting his way, used to intimidating people. Marcus had seen men like this before, both in the military and in his civilian life. They were bullies who used their size and their attitude to push around people they thought were weaker. Marcus hoped he was wrong about these men, but his instincts told him to be careful. The big man looked around the parking lot, and his eyes stopped when he saw Marcus sitting in his wheelchair near the diner entrance. Marcus saw the man's expression change, saw a cruel smile spread across his face. The man said something to his companions, and they all turned to look at Marcus. Marcus felt his heart rate increase slightly, but he kept his face calm. He had learned long ago not to show fear to bullies. Instead, he sat up straighter in his wheelchair and met the big man's stare directly. If these men were looking for trouble, they were going to find out that Marcus Thompson was not an easy target. The morning that had started so peacefully was about to become much more complicated. The big man with the beard walked slowly toward Marcus, his heavy boots making loud sounds on the pavement. His 11 friends followed behind him, spreading out in a half circle. Marcus could feel their eyes on him, studying him like he was some kind of strange animal in a zoo. The leader stopped about 6 feet away from Marcus's wheelchair. Up close, he looked even bigger and more dangerous. His leather jacket had patches sewn on it, and one of them said, "Tank" in big red letters. His arms were thick with muscles, and his hands looked like they could crush things easily. A skull tattoo covered most of his left arm, and smaller tattoos decorated his knuckles. "Well, well, well," Tank said, his voice loud and mocking. "Look what we got here, boys. Somebody's taking up space in our parking lot." The other bikers laughed and made comments. Marcus noticed that some of them looked uncomfortable, like they weren't sure this was a good idea. But they were all following Tank's lead, and Tank clearly enjoyed being the center of attention. Marcus kept his voice calm and steady. "Good morning, gentlemen. I'm just here to get some breakfast. No trouble intended." Tank bent down so his face was closer to Marcus's level. Marcus could smell cigarettes and beer on his breath, even though it was still morning. "No trouble intended?" Tank repeated, making his voice sound high and whiny like he was making fun of Marcus. "Did you hear that, boys? The cripple says no trouble intended." The word cripple hit Marcus like a punch to the stomach, but he didn't let it show on his face. He had heard that word before, many times, and he had learned not to let it control his emotions. But inside he felt the old familiar anger starting to build. "That's not a very nice word," Marcus said quietly. "I'm sure your mother taught you better manners than that." Tank's face turned red, and his friends laughed nervously. Nobody talked back to Tank, especially not someone in a wheelchair. Tank stood up straight and crossed his arms over his chest. "My mother?" Tank said, his voice getting louder. "You don't know nothing about my mother. And you don't know nothing about manners either, sitting there taking up space like you own the place." One of Tank's friends, a thin man with long greasy hair, stepped forward. "Yeah, man, this is our spot now. We saw it first." Marcus looked around the nearly empty parking lot. There were plenty of spaces for everyone, but these men weren't really interested in parking spaces. They were interested in causing trouble, and Marcus just happened to be an easy target. "There's room for everyone," Marcus said calmly. "The diner is open to the public." Tank laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "The public? You think you're part of the public? Look at yourself, man. Rolling around in that chair, probably living off government money, taking handouts from hard-working people like us." More of the bikers joined in now, emboldened by Tank's words. They made cruel jokes about Marcus's wheelchair, calling it his baby carriage and asking if he needed help changing his diaper. One of them, a man with a shaved head and gold teeth, started making exaggerated limping motions, pretending to be disabled. Marcus felt his hands tighten on the arms of his wheelchair. These men had no idea who he was or what he had been through. They saw only the wheelchair and made assumptions about his character, his worth, his contributions to society. "You know what I think?" Tank continued, his voice getting nastier. "I think you're one of those fake heroes. Probably hurt yourself in some stupid accident, and now you want everyone to feel sorry for you. Am I right, boys?" The group laughed and agreed with Tank. They were getting braver now, moving closer to Marcus. The thin man with greasy hair kicked at one of Marcus's wheelchair wheels, making the chair jolt backward a few inches. "Hey," Marcus said sharply. "Don't touch my chair." "Or what?" Tank asked, spreading his arms wide. "What are you gonna do about it? Stand up and fight me?" The cruel laughter got louder. Marcus looked toward the diner and saw Frank and Betty watching through the window. Frank had moved closer to the door, and Marcus could see he was holding something in his hand, probably getting ready to call the police. But Marcus knew that help wouldn't arrive in time if these men decided to get violent. Another biker, this one wearing a bandana over his hair, spoke up. "Maybe we should help him out of that chair. Teach him what it feels like to crawl around on the ground where he belongs." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. These men were talking about physically attacking him now. What had started as verbal harassment was escalating into something much more dangerous. Tank walked even closer, until he was standing right next to Marcus's wheelchair. He put one heavy boot on the footrest, applying pressure that made the whole chair shake slightly. "You know what your problem is?" Tank said, his voice low and threatening. "You think you deserve respect just because you're sitting in that chair. But respect is something you earn, and from where I'm standing, you haven't earned nothing." Marcus looked up at Tank, studying the man's face carefully. He had learned to read people during his years as a counselor, and what he saw in Tank's eyes worried him. This wasn't just a bully looking for fun. This was a man with real anger inside him, anger that could explode into violence at any moment. "You're right about one thing," Marcus said quietly. "Respect is something you earn, and right now you're not earning any." Tank's face got even redder. He lifted his foot off the wheelchair and took a step back, his hands clenched into fists. "What did you just say to me?" The other bikers sensed that their leader was getting really angry now, and they moved closer. Marcus was completely surrounded, with no clear path to escape. Even if he could get his wheelchair moving fast enough, there were too many of them to outrun. "I said respect is earned," Marcus repeated, his voice steady despite the danger. "And bullying a disabled man in a parking lot isn't the way to earn it." One of the younger bikers, who looked like he might be in his 20s, tugged on Tank's jacket. "Come on, Tank. Let's just go inside and get some food. This isn't worth it." "But—" Tank shoved the young man away. "Don't tell me what to do, rookie. This guy needs to learn some lessons about showing respect to his betters." Tank reached down and grabbed one of the handles on the back of Marcus's wheelchair. "Maybe a little ride around the parking lot will help you remember your place." Marcus felt the wheelchair start to move as Tank began pushing him roughly across the pavement. The other bikers followed, laughing and making more cruel comments. Marcus gripped the wheels, trying to stop the chair, but Tank was too strong. "Let go of my chair," Marcus said, his voice getting harder. "Right now." "Or what?" Tank laughed. "You gonna call your mommy? You gonna cry to the police?" Marcus was thinking fast now. He had been in dangerous situations before, during his time in the military. He knew that sometimes you had to act quickly to prevent a bad situation from becoming worse. These men thought he was helpless, thought he was an easy victim. They had no idea what kind of man they were dealing with. Tank pushed the wheelchair toward the edge of the parking lot, where the pavement dropped off into a drainage ditch. It wasn't very deep, but if Marcus's chair went over the edge, he could be seriously hurt, and these men might not stop there. "You know what?" Marcus said, reaching slowly into his jacket pocket. "I think it's time to make a phone call." Tank stopped pushing the wheelchair and laughed loudly. "A phone call? Who you gonna call, Superman? The superhero hotline?" The other bikers thought this was hilarious. They gathered around closer, all of them laughing and making jokes about who Marcus might be calling for help. But Marcus wasn't laughing. He pulled out his cell phone and scrolled through his contacts with calm, steady fingers. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this, had hoped these men would just leave him alone. But they had made their choice, and now he was going to make his. "Yeah," Marcus said quietly, more to himself than to them. "Time to make that call." Tank was still laughing, still thinking this was all a big joke. He had no idea that his morning was about to take a very different turn. None of them did. They thought they were dealing with a helpless man in a wheelchair. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Marcus found the number he was looking for and pressed the call button. As the phone began to ring, he looked up at Tank with an expression that was completely calm and completely serious. "You had your chance to walk away," Marcus said softly. "You should have taken it." Tank threw his head back and laughed so hard that tears came to his eyes. "Oh, this is perfect. The cripple thinks he's gonna call someone to save him. What's next? You gonna call Superman?" The other bikers joined in the laughter, slapping each other on the back and making jokes. The thin man with greasy hair pulled out his own phone and pretended to dial. "Hello, police. There's a scary man in a wheelchair threatening us big tough bikers. Maybe he's calling his social worker, said the man with gold teeth, asking for his monthly check to come early. Marcus ignored their mocking and kept his phone pressed to his ear. The ringing continued once, twice, 3 times. Then someone answered. Rodriguez, came a gruff voice through the phone. Mike, it's Marcus, Marcus said, his voice calm and professional. I've got a situation here at Frank's Diner on Highway 9. Need some backup. Tank's laughter got even louder. Backup? Did you hear that, boys? He's calling for backup. What is this, some kind of war movie? But Marcus continued talking into the phone like Tank wasn't even there. 12 subjects, all on motorcycles. Leader goes by the name Tank. They've surrounded me, made threats, put hands on my wheelchair. Without permission. The word subjects made some of the bikers look at each other strangely. That wasn't how normal people talked. That was how police officers and military people talked. Tank's smile wavered just a little bit, but he kept up his tough act. Subjects? What are you, some kind of cop? You don't look like no cop to me. Marcus pulled out a small notebook from his shirt pocket and started reading details into the phone. Primary subject is approximately 6 feet 3 inches tall, 240 pounds, black beard, multiple tattoos including a skull design on left arm. Wearing leather jacket with Tank patch. Tank's face went a little pale. Those details were very specific, very accurate. And Marcus was rattling them off like he had been trained to observe and report. Vehicle description, Marcus continued. Black Harley-Davidson, probably 2019 or 2020 model. Custom exhaust, chrome accessories. License plate, ... Marcus paused to look directly at Tank's motorcycle. Charlie-Romeo-7-7-9-2. Tank's mouth fell open. He looked back at his bike, then at Marcus, then back at his bike. Marcus had memorized his license plate number. When had he done that? And why was he talking like some kind of professional? Yeah, Mike, they're still here, Marcus said into the phone. Made verbal threats, used racial slurs, physically contacted my wheelchair. I'd say we're looking at assault, harassment, maybe intimidation charges if they don't back off. The young biker who had tried to calm Tank down earlier tugged on his leader's sleeve. Tank man, maybe we should just go. This guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about. But Tank's pride wouldn't let him back down. Shut up, rookie. He's just some disabled guy trying to scare us. Probably calling his mommy. Marcus looked up from his phone and stared directly at Tank. Secondary subjects include 1 male, approximately 5 feet 10 inches, 160 pounds, brown hair, needs a shower. He was describing the greasy-haired man perfectly. Another male, 6 feet even, gold dental work, tribal tattoo on right hand. The man with gold teeth unconsciously covered his tattooed hand with his other hand. How had Marcus noticed that? They had been focused on intimidating him, but he had been studying them like a detective. Vehicle descriptions for the others, Marcus continued into the phone. Red Kawasaki, blue Yamaha, 2 more Harleys, 1 Honda. Want me to run the plates on those 2? Tank was getting nervous now, but he tried to hide it by getting more aggressive. Hang up that phone right now. You hear me? Hang it up or I'll smash it. Marcus didn't even look at him. Suspect is now making threats to destroy property. Escalating behavior. Possible intent to commit additional crimes. I'm not a suspect, Tank shouted. We're just having some fun. Fun? Marcus raised an eyebrow and spoke into the phone. Subject claims harassment and intimidation is fun. Possible psychological evaluation needed. Some of the other bikers started looking really uncomfortable now. This wasn't going the way they had planned. Tank was supposed to scare this guy, have some laughs, and then they would go inside for breakfast. But instead, this man in the wheelchair was talking like he was building a legal case against them. Mike, yeah, I can keep eyes on them until you arrive, Marcus said. What's your ETA? There was a pause while Marcus listened to the response. The bikers watched his face, trying to figure out what was being said on the other end of the call. 15 minutes? That works. I'll maintain visual contact and keep documenting their behavior. Tank's face was getting redder, but now it was from fear instead of anger. Who are you talking to? What do you mean 15 minutes? Marcus looked at him with the same calm expression he had worn throughout the whole confrontation. I'm talking to people who don't like it when veterans get harassed by weekend warriors. Veterans? The word hit Tank like a slap. You're a veteran? 2 tours in Afghanistan, Marcus said simply. Lost my legs to an IED while serving my country. The people I'm talking to are my old unit. We stay in touch. We look out for each other. The young biker stepped forward again. Tank, we need to go, right now. This is getting way out of hand. But Tank was still trying to save face. I don't care if you're a veteran or not. That doesn't give you the right to come in here acting all high and mighty. Marcus spoke into the phone again. Subject is now claiming military service doesn't deserve respect. Possible anti-veteran sentiment. I never said that. Tank protested. I support the troops. Do you? Marcus asked. Because 5 minutes ago you were calling me a fake hero. You said I was probably living off government handouts. You physically assaulted a disabled veteran. Is that how you support the troops? The parking lot had gotten very quiet. Even Tank's most loyal followers were starting to back away from him. They had signed up to be tough guys, not to attack disabled veterans. Marcus continued his phone conversation. Yeah, Mike, they're getting agitated. Better step it up if you can. In the distance, very faintly, the sound of engines could be heard. But these weren't motorcycle engines. These were deeper, more powerful. The sound of trucks and SUVs driving fast. Tank heard it too, and his face went completely white. What's that sound? Marcus smiled for the first time since the confrontation. Began. That would be my backup arriving. The sound was getting louder now, and Tank could tell it was more than one vehicle. A lot more, and they were heading straight for the diner. Look, Tank said, his voice cracking slightly. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. We didn't mean any real harm. Didn't mean any harm? Marcus repeated. You threatened to dump me out of my wheelchair. You used racial slurs. You put your hands on my property without permission. You called me a fake hero. The sound of approaching vehicles was getting much louder now. Tank looked around at his followers and saw fear in their eyes. Whatever was coming, it was big enough to be heard from miles away. We could just forget this whole thing happened, Tank said desperately. We'll go inside, have some breakfast, mind our own business. Marcus shook his head. You had that chance 15 minutes ago. You chose to be bullies instead. Now you get to face the consequences. The first vehicle appeared in the distance, followed by another, then another. Tank counted at least 4 large SUVs approaching at high speed, and there might be more behind them. Jesus, whispered one of the bikers. What did we get ourselves into? Marcus closed his phone and put it back in his pocket. You got yourselves into a situation you should have avoided. You picked on someone you thought was weak and helpless. You're about to find out how wrong you were. The SUVs were close enough now that Tank could see they were all black, with dark-tinted windows. They looked like the kind of vehicles that government agencies used, or private security companies. Tank's hands were shaking now. Who are you, man? Really? Marcus looked at him with eyes that had seen combat and survived. I'm someone who earned his right to be here. I'm someone who served his country and paid a price for it. And I'm someone who has friends that don't like seeing me disrespected. The lead SUV pulled into the parking lot, followed by the others. They surrounded the area with military precision, blocking all the exits. Tank and his followers were trapped, With nowhere to run, Marcus sat calmly in his wheelchair, watching as the doors of the SUVs began to open. "Like I said, gentlemen, you should have taken the chance to walk away when I offered it." The first black SUV came to a stop just 10 feet away from Marcus's wheelchair. The engine was still running, and through the dark tinted windows, Tank could see the shadows of people moving inside. The second SUV parked behind the first one. Then the third and fourth spread out to block every exit from the parking lot. Tank's mouth was dry as dust. His hands were shaking so badly he had to shove them in his pockets to hide it. This wasn't what was supposed to happen. They were just supposed to have some fun with a disabled guy, eat some breakfast, and ride on down the highway. Now they were surrounded by vehicles that looked like they belonged to the FBI. "Tank," whispered the young biker, his voice full of fear, "we need to get out of here, right now." But there was nowhere to go. The SUVs had positioned themselves like a military operation, cutting off every escape route. Even if they could get to their motorcycles, there was no way out of the parking lot. The driver's door of the first SUV opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall and muscular, with short gray hair and the kind of posture that said military, even without a uniform. He wore dark sunglasses, a black tactical vest, and boots that had seen serious use. On his belt, Tank could see a radio, handcuffs, and what looked like a weapon. "Marcus," the man called out, his voice carrying easily across the parking lot. "You okay, brother?" "I'm fine, Mike," Marcus replied, his voice as calm as if they were talking about the weather. "Just some folks who forgot their manners." More doors opened on the other SUVs. Tank counted 8 men total, all of them built like athletes, all of them moving with the same precise, confident way. These weren't weekend warriors playing dress-up. These were real professionals. The man called Mike walked over to Marcus, and Tank saw him quickly scan the group of bikers with eyes that missed nothing. "These the ones giving you trouble?" "That's them," Marcus said. "The big one calls himself Tank. He's the leader." Mike turned to look at Tank, and even through the dark sunglasses, Tank could feel the intensity of that stare. It was like being examined by a predator deciding whether you were worth hunting. "Is that right?" Mike said, his voice quiet, but somehow more threatening than if he had been shouting. "You been harassing my friend here?" Tank tried to find his voice, but only a squeak came out at first. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Look, mister, we were just having a conversation. No harm done." Mike tilted his head slightly. "A conversation? That's interesting. Because when Marcus called me, he said you put your hands on his wheelchair without permission. In my book, that's assault." "Assault?" Tank's voice cracked. "Come on, man, it wasn't like that. We were just fooling around." One of Mike's team members, a stocky man with arms like tree trunks, spoke up. "Fooling around? Is that what you call threatening a disabled veteran?" Tank looked around desperately at his followers, but they were all backing away from him. The greasy-haired man had actually put his hands up in the air, like he was surrendering. The young biker looked like he might cry. "We didn't know he was a veteran," Tank said weakly. "If we had known ... "If you had known what?" Mike interrupted. "You would have treated him with respect. What about every other person you've bullied? Don't they deserve respect too?" Marcus wheeled his chair closer to where Mike was standing. "Mike, let me introduce you to Tank and his crew. Tank here called me a cripple, said I was living off government handouts, claimed I was a fake hero. His friend over there," Marcus pointed to the man with gold teeth, "suggested they should dump me out of my wheelchair." Mike's jaw tightened. "Is that so?" The man with gold teeth shook his head frantically. "I never said that. I was just joking around." "Joking around about assaulting a disabled veteran?" Another member of Mike's team stepped forward. This one was younger, but his eyes were just as hard. "That's a real funny joke, pal." Tank could see that his situation was getting worse by the minute. These men weren't just random security guards. They moved like soldiers, talked like soldiers, and they clearly considered Marcus to be one of their own. "Look," Tank said, trying to sound reasonable, "maybe we can work this out. We're sorry, okay? We made some mistakes." Mike removed his sunglasses and looked directly at Tank. His eyes were cold and unforgiving. "Mistakes? You think harassing a man who lost his legs serving his country is just a mistake? How were we supposed to know?" Tank protested. "He doesn't look like a soldier." "What's a soldier supposed to look like?" Mike asked. "You think we all fit some kind of stereotype? You think courage only comes in one package?" Marcus spoke up from his wheelchair. "Mike, tell them about Staff Sergeant Rodriguez." Mike's expression softened slightly when he looked at Marcus, but it turned hard again when he faced Tank. "Staff Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez, that's me. I served 3 tours in Afghanistan alongside Marcus Thompson here. Want to know what kind of soldier Marcus was?" Tank didn't answer, but Mike continued anyway. "Marcus was the guy who volunteered for the most dangerous missions. He was the guy who carried wounded soldiers to safety under enemy fire. The day he lost his legs, he was trying to save 2 other soldiers who were trapped in a burning vehicle." The parking lot was completely silent, except for Mike's voice. "The aide that took his legs? It was meant for a convoy carrying medical supplies to an Afghan village. Marcus and his team were clearing the road to make sure those supplies got through safely. He wasn't thinking about himself that day. He was thinking about helping people." Tank felt sick to his stomach. This wasn't some random disabled guy they had picked on. This was a genuine war hero. "After the explosion," Mike continued, "Marcus spent 2 years in hospitals learning how to live again. Did he complain? Did he ask for special treatment? No. He became a counselor to help other veterans who were going through the same thing he went through." One of Tank's bikers, a middle-aged man with a gray beard, stepped forward. "We're sorry." "Man, we really are. We didn't know." Mike turned his attention to the gray-bearded biker. "What's your name, son?" Jimmy Peterson." "You served, Jimmy?" Jimmy nodded. "Army, 2 years in Iraq." Mike's expression changed slightly. "Then you should know better. You should understand what it means to serve your country and come home. Different than when you left." Jimmy hung his head in shame. "You're right. I do know better. I don't know what got into me, following Tank like this." Tank could see his group falling apart. Jimmy's admission had broken something in the other bikers. They were starting to realize that they had crossed a line they never should have crossed. "The thing is," Mike said, addressing the whole group now, "Marcus could have called the police. He could have had you all arrested for assault, harassment, maybe even hate crimes. But instead, he called us. Why?" Tank asked quietly. Mike looked at Marcus, who nodded for him to continue. "Because Marcus believes in giving people a chance to do the right thing. He believes that even bullies can learn to be better people. He wanted to scare you, not destroy your lives." Tank felt tears starting to form in his eyes. He had never felt so ashamed of himself in his entire life. "But here's the thing," Mike continued, his voice getting harder again. "This is your one and only chance. If we ever hear about you harassing veterans or disabled people or anyone else who can't defend themselves, we'll find you. And next time, we won't be so understanding." Tank nodded rapidly. "Yes, sir. Understood, sir." "I'm not your sir," Mike said sharply. "I work for a living. But I am someone who takes care of his brothers. All of his brothers. Including the one sitting in that wheelchair." The sound of more vehicles could be heard in the distance, getting closer. Tank looked around nervously. "That would be the police," Marcus said calmly. "I called them too, just in case things got out of hand." Tank's heart sank. "Are we going to jail?" Marcus looked at Mike, then back at Tank. "That depends. Are you ready to apologize properly? Are you ready to change how you treat people?" Tank looked around at his followers, seeing fear and shame in their faces. Then he looked at Marcus, really looked at him for the first time. Not just a man in a wheelchair, but a human being who had sacrificed more for his country than Tank had ever sacrificed for anything. "Yes," Tank said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're ready." Tank took a deep breath and walked slowly toward Marcus's wheelchair. His legs felt weak and his hands were still shaking. The other bikers watched as their leader approached the man they had been tormenting just minutes before. Everything had changed so quickly that Tank's head was still spinning. When Tank reached Marcus, he stopped and looked down at the ground. He couldn't meet Marcus's eyes. The shame was too heavy, too overwhelming. How could he have been so cruel to someone who had given so much for his country? "I'm sorry," Tank said quietly, his voice barely audible. "I'm really sorry." Marcus studied Tank's face carefully. After years of counseling veterans, he had learned to tell when someone was truly sorry versus when they were just afraid of getting in trouble. Tank's tears looked real. His shame looked real. "Sorry for what exactly?" Marcus asked. His voice wasn't mean, but it wasn't friendly either. "I need to hear you say it." Tank wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I'm sorry for calling you names. I'm sorry for touching your wheelchair without permission. I'm sorry for saying you were a fake hero when you're a real one." His voice broke on the last words. "And?" Marcus prompted. Tank looked confused. "And what? What else are you sorry for?" Tank thought for a moment, then his face crumpled. "I'm sorry for judging you without knowing anything about you. I'm sorry for thinking that being in a wheelchair made you less of a person. I'm sorry for being a bully." Marcus nodded slowly. "Better, but there's one more thing." Tank looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes for the first time. "What?" "Are you sorry for how you've treated other people before today? Because I'm probably not the first person you've bullied." Tank's shoulders slumped. Marcus was right, and they both knew it. There had been other incidents, other people who Tank had intimidated because he could. An elderly man at a gas station who was moving too slowly. A young woman at a restaurant who accidentally spilled something on Tank's jacket. A teenager at a mall who was wearing clothes Tank didn't like. "Yes," Tank whispered. "I'm sorry for all of it. I've been a terrible person." Mike stepped forward. "Being sorry is a good start, Tank, but sorry isn't enough by itself. What are you going to do differently?" Tank looked around at his followers, then back at Marcus and Mike. "I don't know. I mean, I want to change, but I don't know how." Marcus leaned forward in his wheelchair. "You start by treating every person. You meet with basic respect. You don't judge people by how they look, or what kind of car they drive, or whether they're in a wheelchair. You treat them like human beings." "But what if I mess up again?" Tank asked. "What if I forget?" "Then you remember this moment," Marcus said firmly. "You remember how it felt to realize you had been cruel to someone who didn't deserve it. You carry that feeling with you, and you use it to make better choices." Jimmy, the gray-bearded biker who had served in Iraq, stepped forward. "Marcus, sir, can I say something?" Marcus nodded. "Go ahead, Jimmy. I served my country too, and I should have known better. I should have stopped this before it started. I let Tank lead me into doing something shameful, and I'm sorry for that." Jimmy's voice was steady, but his eyes were wet with tears. "Why did you follow him?" Marcus asked gently. Jimmy thought for a moment. "I guess because it was easier than standing up to him. I didn't want to be the target, so I went along with making someone else the target. That was cowardly." Marcus smiled slightly. "Recognizing that takes courage, Jimmy, real courage." The sound of police sirens was getting louder now. "To patrol." Cars pulled into the parking lot, their blue and red lights flashing. Tank's heart started racing again, but Marcus held up his hand. "Relax," Marcus said. "They're here because I called them earlier. But what happens next depends on what you do right now." Officer Sarah Martinez stepped out of the first patrol car. She was a small woman, but she carried herself with confidence. She had worked with Marcus before on cases involving veterans, and she respected him greatly. "Marcus," she called out as she approached. "Everything okay here?" "It is now, Sarah. These gentlemen and I have been having a conversation about respect and second chances." Officer Martinez looked at the bikers, then at Mike's security team, then back at Marcus. She could tell there was more to this story, but she trusted Marcus's judgment. "Anyone need to be arrested today?" she asked. Marcus looked at Tank. "That depends. Tank, are you ready to make this right?" Tank nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir." "Whatever you want me to do," Marcus thought for a moment. "I want you to do 3 things. First, I want you to volunteer at the VA hospital 1 day a month. Help other veterans, learn their stories, understand what service and sacrifice really mean." Tank's eyes widened. "Yes, sir, I can do that." "Second," Marcus continued, "I want you to apologize to every person you remember bullying or harassing. And I mean a real apology, not just sorry if I hurt your feelings." Tank's face went pale. There were a lot of people he would need to apologize to. But he nodded. "I'll do it." "Third," Marcus said, "I want you to think before you speak. Every time you're about to say something mean or cruel, I want you to ask yourself, would I want someone to say this to my mother, to my sister, to my son? If the answer is no, then don't say it." Tank was crying openly now. I promise I'll do all of that." Marcus looked at the other bikers. "What about the rest of you? Are you ready to change too?" One by one, they nodded and made their own promises. The man with gold teeth promised to stop making fun of people who looked different. The thin man with greasy hair promised to stand up for others instead of just following bullies. The young biker promised to think about the consequences of his actions before he acted. Officer Martinez watched this unusual scene with interest. She had expected to arrest several people today, but instead she was witnessing what looked like a group therapy session. Frank and Betty came out of the diner, followed by several customers who had been watching through the windows. Frank walked over to Marcus with a fresh cup of coffee. "Your usual breakfast is ready when you want it," Frank said with a smile. "On the house today." Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thanks, Frank. I think I'd like that." Tank looked at the diner, then back at Marcus. Could we buy you breakfast? As part of our apology?" Marcus considered this. "You know what? Yes, but not just for me. Everyone here. Frank, Betty, Officer Martinez, Mike and his team, everyone." Tank's eyes widened at the size of the bill this would create, but he nodded immediately. "Yes, sir. It would be an honor." As the group began moving toward the diner, Mike put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You sure about this, brother? Giving them a second chance?" Marcus looked back at Tank, who was carefully holding the door open for everyone else, making sure Marcus's wheelchair could get through easily. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Mike. The question is what they do with it." Inside the diner, Tank insisted that Marcus sit at the best table while he and his bikers served as waiters, bringing food and refilling coffee cups. It was a strange sight, tough-looking bikers in leather jackets carefully carrying plates and saying, "Please," and "Thank you" to every customer. As Marcus ate his eggs and toast, he watched Tank helping an elderly woman cut her pancakes. Jimmy was cleaning up a spill without being asked. The young biker was entertaining a family's children with magic tricks. "You know," Officer Martinez said, sitting down next to Marcus, "in 15 years of police work, I've never seen anything like this." Marcus smiled. Sometimes people just need to be reminded of who they really are underneath all the anger and fear. Tank approached the table nervously. "Marcus, sir, I was wondering, when I start volunteering at the VA hospital, could you show me around? Help me understand what I should do?" Marcus looked at this man who had been his tormentor just an hour ago and saw something different now. The anger was gone, replaced by genuine remorse and a desire to do better. I'd be honored to, Tank. What's your real name, by the way? Tank looked embarrassed. Thomas Mitchell. Tank was just trying to sound tough, I guess. Well, Thomas, Marcus said, extending his hand. Welcome to the first day of the rest of your life. As they shook hands, Marcus felt something he always felt when his work as a counselor succeeded. Hope. Hope that people could change, that kindness could overcome cruelty, and that everyone deserved a chance at redemption. Outside, the morning sun continued to shine on the little diner where 12 bullies had learned one of the most important lessons of their lives, that true strength comes not from intimidating others, but from lifting them up. The story would spread through the motorcycle community and beyond, not as a tale of humiliation, but as proof that it's never too late to become a better person. And Marcus Thompson, the man in the wheelchair who had turned enemies into friends with one phone call, would continue to change lives one conversation at a time.